The shove was real, and that was the one thing nobody watching could tell. 2 cameras were rolling. 40 people stood behind the lights in the desert heat, watching a scene get made, a saloon brawl, scripted down to the beat, rehearsed twice that morning. And when the giant in the filthy cowboy costume grabbed the small man by the collar and drove him backward through the swinging doors, every single person on that set read it as acting. It was not acting. And the only man alive who knew it was not acting was the small man whose spine had just met a set of oak doors at a speed the script had never called for. To understand why a stuntman would try to hurt a man for real on a live take in front of 2 cameras and one of the most famous actors in the world, you have to understand what had been building on that set for 2 weeks and what it does to a certain kind of professional to watch the ground shift under the only thing he was ever good at. His name was Cody Rock, and he was one of the last of a particular breed. He was 6'6", and he had come up through the rodeo and the circus and the poverty row westerns of the 40s, and he had spent 30 years being thrown off horses, dragged behind wagons, and set on fire for money, and he had the ruined knees and the missing back teeth to show for every year of it. He was, in the narrow and genuine sense, a master of a craft that was disappearing. He could take a fall that would hospitalize a normal man and stand up grinning. He could throw a movie punch that stopped a 1/4 inch off your jaw and looked on film like it broke bone. He knew where every camera was without being told, knew how to sell a hit to a lens 40 feet away, knew the 1,000 small cheats that made fake violence look true, a craft with no school and no diploma, learned only by doing it 10,000 times and getting hurt on most of them. He had doubled for the biggest stars in the business, and the biggest star of all, the old king of the Western himself, asked for Cody by name on every picture because Cody made the fights look real. If you want to understand why a proud man like that turned dangerous, stay with this, because it was not stupidity and it was not simple meanness. It was fear, the specific fear of a craftsman who has just watched the future walk onto his set and make his whole life's work look slow. Because the production had brought in a fight choreographer, a small Chinese-American, quiet, polite, half Cody's size, hired to modernize the action for a new kind of audience, and in 2 weeks he had, without ever raising his voice, rebuilt the way fights were shot on that picture from the ground up. He'd shown the camera operators angles nobody had used. He'd taught the young stunt performers movement that made Cody's honest, brutal 30-year-old style look like a man wading through mud. He was never unkind about it. That was almost the worst part. He complimented Cody's falls, sincerely, called him one of the best he'd ever seen, and then quietly demonstrated a thing with his hands that made every man on the set go silent, and Cody would watch the young guys look at the small man the way they used to look at Cody and feel 30 years turning to dust in the desert sun. He'd said things, by the second week, in the equipment tent, to the other old hands, that the little man had never taken a real hit in his life, that all that flowing around was fine for the camera, but wouldn't survive one honest second with a real Western stuntman who meant it. That movie fighting was one thing, and a real man putting his hands on you was another, and that somebody ought to show the choreographer the difference before he forgot there was one. The old hands had mostly let it go. Cody hadn't been able to. So when the schedule came around to the big saloon fight, the one where Cody's character throws the smaller man out through the doors to start the brawl, Cody made a decision he told nobody. He decided that on the take he was going to shove for real, not to injure, exactly, to prove, to drive the little man through those doors hard enough and real enough that the flowing and the philosophy fell apart, and everyone watching would see on film the choreographer eat a genuine Western hit and stumble like anybody else. It would look like the scene. Only Cody would know it was true. That was the whole appeal of it, a private victory hidden inside a public take. The director called for quiet, and the set did the thing sets do, the 100 small sounds of 40 people falling still at once, a wrangler steadying a horse off camera, a sound man lifting his boom, the second camera creeping in on its dolly. The old king took his mark to the side, in character, hand near his holster, watching from under the brim of his hat. A young stunt performer stood at the edge of the light, mouthing the choreography to himself. The cameras rolled. Somebody called action, and Cody grabbed the small man by the collar and drove him backward through the saloon doors, with everything 30 years had given him, for real, meaning every ounce of it. Here is the part worth staying for, because what happened next happened entirely inside a shot that looked to every eye on that set like a scene going exactly to plan. The small man felt the difference instantly. Anyone who has taken a worked hit and a real one knows they do not feel remotely alike, and he knew, in the quarter second the grab began, that this one was real. And in that same quarter second, he made a decision that Cody Rock would spend the rest of his life turning over, because it was not the decision Cody expected, and it was not the decision almost anyone would have made. He did not resist the shove and blow the take. He did not throw Cody off and stop the scene and expose him in front of 40 people and the cameras. He went with it. He rode the real shove exactly as though it were the scripted one, let it carry him back through the doors, and turned all that genuine violence into the most convincing version of the beat the director could have dreamed of. On film, it was perfect. It was better than perfect. The little man went through those doors like a man who had really been thrown, because he really had been, and the camera drank it up. But going through the doors was where the script stopped, and where the two of them alone began. Because now they were in the fight, the choreographed brawl, and the cameras were still rolling, and Cody had just committed the one unforgivable sin of his profession. He'd made it real without telling his partner, and his partner had accepted the terms without a word. And over the next 90 seconds, in front of everyone, inside a fight that looked entirely scripted, the small man gave Cody Rock a private and comprehensive education that not one person watching could see. The script called for Cody to throw a haymaker. He threw it for real hard at the jaw, and the small man slipped it by the exact half-inch the choreography called for, so that on camera it looked like a beautifully sold near miss, except Cody felt the air of his own fist go past a head that was never going to be there, and felt a beat later the small man's open hand touch his ribs, light in a spot the script did not mention. A spot low under the arm where a real strike would have taken the wind and the will out of him at once, and then withdraw as though it had only been part of the dance. To the camera, two men circling in a saloon. To Cody, a message delivered in a language only the two of them were speaking. I could have, I didn't. The script called for a grapple by the bar. Cody made it real, tried to actually muscle the smaller man, to use the 30 years and the 80 pounds, and found that there was nothing to muscle. The small man was never quite where Cody's strength arrived, flowing around the grip exactly within the blocking, so that it read on film as a gorgeous choreographed struggle, and felt to Cody like trying to wrestle water while the water tapped him twice on the throat to show him it could. Every real thing Cody tried, the small man answered inside the fiction of the scene, turning each genuine assault into a perfect cinematic beat, and underneath it, a quiet correction. On the outside, the best shot fight of the entire production. On the inside, a man being dismantled so gently and so completely that he could not even stop it without admitting to 40 witnesses what he'd done. And the terrible, wonderful thing, the thing that broke something loose in Cody Rock, was that the small man was making him look magnificent. Every angle the choreographer flowed into made Cody's fall look better, his timing look sharper, his brawl look more real than any brawl he'd shot in 30 years. The little man was not humiliating him. He was hiding Cody's ambush from the whole world and turning it in real time into the best work of Cody's late career and letting only Cody know the truth of it. He was being given, simultaneously, the lesson and the mercy, and he understood both while they were still on their feet. The scripted finish called for Cody to go over the bar. On the take, exhausted, his real strength spent against a man who had never once fought him back in a way the camera could see, Cody committed to the fall, and the small man's hand found his shoulder at the exact instant, guiding the fall into something clean and safe and spectacular, so that Cody Rock, 30-year master of the movie Fall, took the best fall of his life over that bar with a man half his size making sure he landed right. The director let the scene run 3 full seconds past the last beat because he could feel he had something, and then he called cut, and there was a silence, and then he said into it the word every crew lives for. He said, "Print it. That's the take. That's the fight for the whole picture." And the set broke into the loose applause. Crews give a scene that everyone can feel is going to be in the trailer, and the young stunt performers were shaking their heads and grinning, and not one of them, not one knew they had just watched a real fight. They thought they'd watched a great fake one. 2 men knew. Cody Rock lay on the floor behind the bar getting his breath, and the small man came around and crouched beside him out of the eye line of the crew and put out a hand to help him up, the same gesture but private this time, no audience for it, and he said something low that only Cody heard. The old hands nearby said afterward they saw Cody go very still and then nod and then take the hand. Nobody ever got the whole of what was said. But one thing travelled, because a grip near the bar caught the tail of it, and it was the small man's voice, even and without any edge, saying, "You're the best I've worked with." He said it to the man who had just tried to hurt him for real on a live take. And then the grip swore. He said one thing more, quieter, "Don't ever make it real again without telling me. Not because you'd win, because next time I might not have the camera to think about." The old king had watched the whole thing from his mark, in character, hand near his holster, and he was a man who had been making westerns for 40 years and had seen every fight a set could produce. He did not say much, but when Cody came off the floor, the old star walked over and put a hand on the giant's shoulder and looked at the small man for a moment with an expression the crew rarely saw on him, and said only, to both of them, "That's the best thing this camera's caught in 20 years. Then he went back to his mark, because there was more picture to shoot, and a set does not stop for anything, not even for the thing that just happened. The film came out the next year. The Saloon fight is still in it. It runs about 90 seconds, and people have watched it for decades and called it one of the great underrated screen brawls, and film students have broken it down frame by frame to study the choreography, the timing of it, the realism of it, the way the big cowboy and the smaller man move together like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. They marvel at how real it looks. They have it backwards, and they will never know it. It does not look real because it was expertly faked. It looks real because for about 90 seconds, inside a Hollywood Western, with 2 cameras rolling and 40 people watching and none of them the wiser, it was the only genuine fight ever committed to a major motion picture, and the man who won it spent every second of the win making sure the man who started it would come out looking like a legend.